show now is Ari DeLashmutt, better known as Ari in the Air. Ari, how you doing today?
Hey, thanks. Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. So who is Ari DeLashmutt? He's the guy who flew from Oregon down to Nevada in a what's the apparatus? What's the paragliding? Paragliding? What's the
Yeah, so it is a very niche sport that we're talking about here, and it's paragliding. This is a particular sect of paragliding called cross-country paragliding, where we use thermals and wind to climb up into the sky, just like the birds. They fly in circles in lifting air, and they go up and up and up. And then when we get to the top of the lift, we glide downwind, and then we find another thermal and climb up, and we do this all day, and we can fly very, very far. So yeah.
All right, well, let's just talk about your most recent one. Like a state record for longest flight. You know, tell us a little bit more about this. Last flight from where you started, and where you ended, and
Yeah.
how long it took, and all that good stuff.
Okay. So paragliding in Central Oregon, the bread and butter is Pine Mountain, which is east of town. It has the Pine Mountain Observatory on it. And so I launched off of there on Wednesday, the 27th at 11:46 a.m., which I could have launched earlier, and I should have. But yeah, so from there I caught a nice climb up to about 9,000 feet and headed over the back of the mountain. And after a series of climbs, I crossed the large flat area behind Pine Mountain to Christmas Valley, which is a very small rural farming town south of there, and continued south to the west of Summer Lake over the beautiful hot springs, and then flew all the way south to Lakeview, Oregon. And behind Lakeview, Oregon, there's this beautiful mountain range called the Werners, and I got onto the Werner mountain range. And from there, I flew the entire length of the Werner mountain range. Lakeview from Pine Mountain is about 115 miles. So, and that ended up being just the halfway point of my flight, because I did make 230 miles that day and landed right on the side of Highway 395, about 65 miles south of Alturas, California, which is another small rural farming town in California. My flight was 8 hours and 53 minutes. Okay. I got to a max altitude of 16,500 feet. I flew with no oxygen, which is typically recommended if the top of lift is forecasted for anything over about 14,000 feet. But very experienced paraglide pilot, and so I've been paragliding a lot lately. Just 7 days before, on the 20th of July, I flew 194.5 miles to the east and nearly landed in Idaho. I landed just 7 miles short of the Idaho border. So I'm kind of warmed up. So I didn't really need the oxygen. I felt great all day, and luckily, I have good friends who empowered my flight by, I filled up my car with gas, and I put a cooler in it and my sleeping bag, and my friend Trevor picked up my car and drove to California to pick me up, and was there on the side of 395 within half an hour of me landing. So that really is kind of what makes the whole thing go around.
So it's an 8 hour flight,
9 hour flight,
9 hour flight that you're on. How much of that are you like having to work and like keep things, because you are kind of you're a pilot, you're flying, you're thousands of feet in the air.
Yeah.
What's
lot
it just
more
like?
than a lot more than your typical airline pilot. There's no cruise control on this object.
So can you just kind of take us through what you're kind of doing, to get to where you want to be?
Yeah. It's interesting. Cross-country paragliding is, I was a professional skier and I'm a professional highliner. I walk the longest slack lines in the world, and I have always been very adventurous and outdoorsy. And
Mhm.
cross-country paragliding, as far as I can tell, is absolutely the pinnacle of sport. It is the pinnacle of adventure. The amount of landscape you can cross, the vastness of the arena that you're playing in, right? I flew 230 miles, and that's not even close to the world record. So the just the size and the scope of the game that we're playing is hard to it's hard for me to explain that, because literally I crossed multiple mountain ranges, right? I crossed from the center of Oregon down very far into California. So what am I doing up there? The answer to that is very layered. So on the first layer, you have the handling of the glider, the lefts and rights of this thing, right? How to make it fly in a certain direction, how to turn it, how to control it, how to keep it open when you're flying in turbulence, how to keep it from collapsing, how to make it go fast, how to make it go slow, how to efficiently use the thermals to climb up. That's like the first layer.
Mhm.
The next layer is, where do I fly it? And this is the way more complex. It's almost like the paraglider itself is complicated. It has left and rights, but then there's a couple scales of magnitude in complexity into where do you fly it? Because now in that layer, we're talking about, where is the air going to rise? And why do I know it's going to rise there? And all of these different things. And the air is an invisible substrate, which is what makes cross-country paragliding such a difficult, fantastic, surreal, unimaginable thing to do, right? The air is invisible. So you can't know exactly what's happening. So basically, I'm like, my brain is doing these like really complex probabilities on where the thermal is going to be based on the direction of the sun, the direction of the wind, the shape of the terrain, the location, size, shape of the clouds. I'm looking for dust devils. I'm looking for birds. I'm looking for um, any kind of indication that is showing me that the air is rising, because otherwise it's just invisible. So um, on and then another layer is like my physiology, right? So I am not only trying to eat, drink, and pee, I am also trying to make sure that I don't land in a place that is going to be dangerous for me. The day that I flew to California, it was 105 on the ground.
Mhm.
Summer Lake, it was 108 on the ground, 110 on the ground. So I'm literally trying to fly a route that supports me living,
Mhm.
because this whole chess game that I'm telling you about, I'm playing it with my body. I'm playing it with my life. It's very dangerous, right?
Mhm.
So that's all, like, there's just so many different layers to this. Um, when I was west of Summer Lake, there's no bushes, there's no shade, there's no trees, there's no roads. There's a big gap there where I'm basically in no man's land. And it's very hot, and I really don't want to land there. And I got low in there twice, and it was very stressful. And I was so glad to get out of there and get very tall or very high in the sky after that. So, um, yeah, and there's another part of what I'm doing where I'm trying my best to just take in what I'm doing and just try to come back to being present and observant and grateful that I have the opportunities and skills and equipment and experience that allows this kind of thing, right? So as I'm at 14,000 feet over the Werner mountain range, that I've never been there before. I've never seen it. And it's, I'm looking off into the Black Rock Desert where they do Burning Man in Nevada. I can see the desert there. I can, you know, I can see the foothills of Mount Shasta with big clouds on Mount Shasta. I can look back at the whole route that I've just flown and all these crazy clouds that are huge. And so I'm trying to do a lot of different things. I'm also trying to, make sure that where I land is somewhere that people can pick me up, because my glider bag, there are lightweight versions of paragliders that are much easier to hike, but this one is a racing paraglider and it weighs, in excess of 70 pounds altogether. So it's really not a super friendly thing to throw on your back and hike a long ways.
That's funny. When I first came across, this, your story and what you had just done, the first thing that came to my mind was like, how does he go to the bathroom? How does he eat? How do you kind of manage, some of those things that you mentioned, during a flight?
Yeah, so these are really common questions, and it's so funny because basically the moment that someone realizes that I was in the sky for 9 hours, it is the first question: how do you pee? You know,
I mean,
I use
nature
a con
calls.
yeah, it does. Nature calls. I use a condom catheter. So there's just a medical device. It's instead of having lubricant on your condom, this has adhesive, and so it just is external, and you put it on, and it has a tube on the end of it that goes out of your harness. So it's quite easy to pee. And I have a camelback, right?
Mhm.
That I actually have two camelbacks on this particular harness, and so I have access to about 6 liters of water during my flight. On this flight, I drank just 2 liters, um, and I have this. So here in my neighborhood, my best friends are professional adventure racers, which is a whole nother incredible sport. Um, and they make a product called 4 Hour Fuel. It's a maltodextrin based drink mix that has, in about one bike bottle worth, it has 800 calories. So I have this drink mix that has, electrolytes and BCAAs and pea protein and maltodextrin. It's a really good thing to consume. It's really easy. It's really fast. It's really easy on your stomach. And so that is one of like the backbones of my nutrition system. I also, on that particular flight, I ate 2 caffeinated Pro bars that had some coffee in them, just like a little bit of a boost. And in that 4 Hour Fuel stuff, I also mix in nootropics, so like cognitive enhancing drugs.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got the system pretty
Yeah.
dialed at this point. I have, I've been paragliding for 8 years and have something in excess of 2,000 flight hours, and um, one of the most accomplished cross country pilots in the country,
Mhm.
um, and still learning and growing so much in the sport. And there's so much more room for me to continue learning and growing, because the level at the top of the world and even the top of this country is really, really high. And so it's a wonderful place to be, to feel myself with a deep mastery of the sport, and
Mhm.
some accomplishments that I can be really proud of, and also just seeing how much more is possible.
So what got you into this? You called this, I believe you said it was like, the pinnacle of like adventure sports.
Uh-huh.
And what were some of those steps that kind of got you to this point? What were some of the things that you were doing where you're just like, all right, now I got to try this?
Yeah, so uh, you know, I grew up with my mom and my stepdad working at Mount Bachelor. My father was a competition water skier and a snow skier, and so I basically, and I'm also the middle of 3 boys. So like
Mhm.
between jumping off cliffs and jumping into trees and just being a reckless child, and having a sporting father and having lots of opportunities that he provided for us to do sports and be outside, um, it just kind of grew. When I was 12, I did my first backflip on skis at Mount Bachelor. And then I chased professional freestyle skiing until my late 20s. Um, and then I learned how to highline, which is slacklining way off of the ground, between the
Mhm.
cliffs at Smith Rock and things like that. Um, and then I was making films actually, and my friend Wes Coughlin, who's a talented filmmaker here in Bend, we got this opportunity to film this stunt with this base jumper who lives here in town. His name is Matthias Super Frenchy. And he did a rope swing out of a tandem paraglider off of another paraglider and then fell 1,000 feet, pulled his parachute, and landed. And we made a film of that stunt. So that was the first time I had ever seen paragliding.
Mhm.
First time I'd ever seen paragliding was like some people were doing some pretty high level stuff with paragliders. So that was in October that we did that stunt. And then by February, I was at the beach learning how to paraglide. And then
Mhm.
it's been a rocket ship ride in paragliding ever since, because it instantly took over my life and has excited me and in really profound ways. And I've traveled the world. I've flown in 15 countries on 5 continents, and have taught lots of people to paraglide, and have trained in acrobatics and in tandem and in cross country and in competition. So I've done a lot of paragliding. So yeah, that's kind of like a little bit of my story of how I got to setting records.
Yeah, it sounds like you just like kind of like to stare death in the face and just be like, not this time.
Yeah, you could say that. It's also like staring fun in the face. And once you start doing the strong version, the real strong versions of fun, then you have to kind of stay on the real strong versions of fun.
Mhm. So what is it about paragliding that just like that hooked you?
Well, when I think back to like the first time that I was hooked, it was actually going up, right? It was like the moment the paraglider took me up, I think my life changed there.
Mhm.
As a professional skier, I had hiked all kinds of mountains and then gone down. As a mountain biker, I had pedaled up and then gone down. I had put all the effort into the system and then reaped the reward as I went down. But never had I had nature actually take me up. And
Mhm.
I think that was the moment that it changed. So there's something about being in the right place at the right time with the right skills and being in touch with nature
Mhm.
that provides like a transcendental experience, right? Where it's like actually you're in touch with something bigger than yourself and you're working together with this larger thing. And the aliveness that comes from that is hard to explain. There's also another layer, which is that flying is just surreal. Like
Mhm.
it's unhuman. It's like your body, the first time you fly at all, your body is just like, and it's different than being in an airplane in a closed cockpit that's like a car. We're all used to that kind of environment, that kind of feeling. But a paraglider, you're just out in the air. You're just
Mhm.
dangling from a bed sheet and strings. And so that feeling, coupled with the working with nature, coupled with the view, right? Like the view from
Mhm.
16,000 feet in a paraglider is just, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So, um, the thing that hooks you is as layered as the sport itself. It's everything from the physical experience to how cool it is to like be able to handle this contraption. Right. I
Mhm.
just love the object itself. It's just that they're just the coolest objects in the world. Like it's amazing that humans have created these like ripstop nylon bags that fly. And they
Mhm.
fly so good. Like it's crazy how much glide, how much performance, how much safety. Like it's just unbelievable. So um it's something that I'm just so passionate about. And yeah, I love it. Happy to share it with you.
Yeah, there was one time I did a story on kind of on paragliding, and went and watched a class that was just going out to fly, and you just kind of watch like the whole setup, how they kind of go and how they take off and whatnot, and it just looked, just getting off the ground looked like so many things just had to like work perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
and if they weren't, they kind of struggled getting off the ground, and then once they got off, then it just looked like, man, that just looks so peaceful.
Yeah.
But the start was anything but. How
Yeah,
long did
that's
it
so
kind
interesting.
Oh, go ahead.
That's so interesting because that's a certain kind of paragliding. What you witnessed in the evening on the hill.
Hmm.
There's like in the evening the air gets a lot softer. But everyone knows what a dust devil is. And a dust devil is the bottom of a thermal. That's where the hot air is leaving the ground and it's creating such a swirl that it picks up the dirt. That kind of air is not peaceful. That kind of air, that's the kind of air I'm looking for to fly really far. I'm looking for very strong updrafts. And the updrafts mix with the downdrafts and can create shears and can create very turbulent, violent air. And so there's a huge part of my 9 hour flight. For about 6.5 hours of that, it's pretty full on. Like it's at times a wrestling match with the glider. Um, and it's not that peaceful, which is a environment that I've grown quite comfortable in, as you can
Hmm.
imagine. Like the high intensity action sports where my life is at risk is arena that I've played in for my entire adult life. So that's something that I'm pretty well versed in. Um, but you're right. There's all these things that have to line up, and that's the coolest part of a paragliding state record, right? Like one of the coolest parts is like I can't flap, man. I
Hmm.
can't just like I can't just like get on a treadmill and get so strong that I can just fly that far. It's not like that. Like I have to work with nature. I have to like forecast the right day. And then once the day comes, I have to work with that day. I don't have any other options.
Hmm.
Like I have to fly the weather. I have to fly the environment. I have to fly the landscape. I have to fly the sky that day. So one of the funny things about this particular flight is that I smashed the record. The record was 198 miles, and I did 230 miles. So I put a big chunk on top of the record. Right, it didn't just beat it by an inch. Um, the next day, that was Wednesday. Thursday, the forecast looked even better, and then Friday was the biggest forecast I'd ever seen anywhere ever. And I was so exhausted and I couldn't fly it and I already made plans and I just like carried this anxiety around with me all day because I knew that that was the day that I could have flown. I could have put a huge chunk onto what I had just
Hmm.
done. I knew it was possible. And that's the thing. That's the one of the coolest parts of paragliding is that you can't flap. You have to work with nature. And to fly really far, you have to have a day that'll take you really far. And then you have to really use it efficiently and well. And you can't make big mistakes that have you landing early.
Hmm. All right, so you shattered the state record. What's next for you with this with paragliding? You have any other kind of checks you want to cross off?
Yeah. Yeah. So for the last couple of years, I've been getting more and more into competition paragliding, racing paragliders. And
Hmm.
I've been getting better and better at that. So in September, I have a big the U.S. Nationals, which is in Utah. I'm really
Hmm.
looking forward to. Which in Utah, the air is very big. The climbs take you very high. We fly with oxygen and big gloves, and so um, that's kind of lends itself to my style. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then I'm also involved in a type of paraglide racing called hike and fly, where instead of a car driving us up the mountain every day, we hike, and then instead of flying all day, we fly over to this mountain and we have to land on it, and then we have to hike up more and then fly off. And so it's very physical. It takes a enormous amount of endurance and tenacity on your feet to carry your paraglide bag as you climb mountains and run on roads, and there's all kinds of things. So um, I'm looking forward to that. And also, as the pandemic wanes, getting back into some big international travel to places that are obscure. There's a World Cup event in Iran that I'm looking forward to competing in next year. And so, yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, Ari, it was a pleasure to have you on. Can you just let our listeners or readers know where they can kind of follow some of the stuff that you do? Because it sounds like you do this quite often where you take these long trips, and I'm sure people would be interested in seeing that.
Yeah. So, as Brian mentioned, Airy in the Air, that's my Instagram handle. That's my YouTube channel, airyintheair.com, airyintheair@gmail.com. It's like, that's kind of my moniker on the internet. So if you want to follow along, I'd happy to provide some inspiration and enthusiasm through your cell phone.
All right. Well, Ari, hey, it was great to get to know you, learn more about paragliding, and congrats on state record. Hopefully, you'll be breaking that again sometime soon.
Thank you, Brian. Take care.